We're going to talk about Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys. Dak has been involved in the news all week, starting with a report from NBC Sports' Chris Sims that Dak wants more than $45 million a year in the final year of his contract, and reports that Dak turned down a $175 million contract. Dak's agent, Todd France, has refuted that. I tend not to believe it. Other NFL reporters have refuted that. Well, now it looks like NBC Sports has another response, perhaps coming out of the Todd France CAA camp. Pro Football Talk's Mike Florio wrote an article today stating that Dak Prescott has the most contract leverage in the history of the NFL for any quarterback. Florio pointing to the franchise tag and how much money Dak could get this year and the following year, and then in 2022 if they franchise him. And Florio suggests that those numbers mean Dak has the most leverage in the history of the NFL in terms of contract. Marcellus, this isn't tracking for me. Help me understand it. Do you agree that Dak Prescott has the most leverage we've ever seen?
No, I don't agree with it. All I agree is that Dak may get the highest contract in NFL history. He may get the most compensation, but that does not mean he has the most leverage ever. If he had the most leverage ever, he would already have what he wanted. It would be foolproof and concrete in terms of what Dak wants and what the Cowboys must cave and give to him. And that's not the reality. This is why it's not foolproof. Dak goes out there next year and wet the bed. What's going to happen to this contract situation? What's going to happen to the most leverage ever if Dak goes out there and that's a reality, or injury? So those two things right there, poor performance or injury, can undermine all of what we're anticipating Dak to get compensated. So when you have the most leverage ever, you dictate terms. John Elway comes to mind. Eli Manning comes to mind, or my San Diego Chargers. That's leverage. I don't know if it's even the most leverage ever, but certainly it's more than what Dak is showing right now, because Dak can't even get his deal done with, quote unquote, the most leverage. So I disagree with it.
Yeah, see, I'll go on the opposite side of that. I agree with it. He's got the most leverage ever simply because of the franchise tag that's going on right now. He's going to make $31 million. But, you know, when you start looking at Deshaun Watson, he's still got to play out his rookie deal. He's got that fifth-year option as a first-rounder. Same thing with Patrick Mahomes. So, like, they don't have as much leverage as Dak has right now. Now, it doesn't mean that he'll have the most leverage forever, because when those guys are up and they're ready to sign a deal, they're going to usurp whatever deal Dak Prescott gets. But right now, he's got more leverage than I think anybody has ever had, from the standpoint of, are you willing, as the Dallas Cowboys, to say, you know what, we're going to rescind our offer on the franchise tag, and we're going to move to Andy Dalton. See you around, Dak, because Dak will get scooped up in a heartbeat. So do I think he's got great leverage? Absolutely, he's got great leverage right now. I mean, it doesn't mean that he's earned it or that he deserves it or any of that. It's just the way it is. He's got the great leverage. And one thing you can't be afraid to do as a franchise, you can't be afraid to set the market, because guess what happens? 2 years from now, it'll look like a bargain.
Mark, I completely disagree with you for the two names that you referenced. One, you would have to be Patrick Mahomes, to me, to have the most leverage. You'd have to be coming off a Super Bowl, have an MVP trophy, and be seen as the potential greatest quarterback, talent-wise, we've seen since John Elway. That gives you leverage. And then the other thing that I think undermines Dak leverage is the other name you mentioned, Andy Dalton. And so what we're witnessing, in my view, is a behind-the-scenes war between the Cowboys and Dak's agent, Todd France, and it's a leverage war of leaks. The Cowboys got Chris Sims to argue that Dak turned down the richest contract ever. That put Dak in an uncomfortable conversation, a negative conversation about Dak being greedy. They then, Todd France's camp, using Mike Florio again, NBC Sports again, and Dak's got the greatest leverage ever, and they want to put that conversation out into the universe. The reality is Dak's losing this negotiation. there are people in Dallas, Cowboys fans, and I would assume Cowboys players that are going to be like, wow, we love Dak, but $40 million a pop, $35 million a pop, as much money as Russell Wilson a pop, I just don't think Cowboys players are going to sign off on that. And Dak right now is lucky that we're in a pandemic and things are shut down, because once Andy Dalton gets in practice with these guys and Dak is holding out, what they're going to find out, there's not much difference between Andy Dalton and Dak Prescott. Dak runs a little bit better than Andy Dalton. That's it. In terms of arm, accuracy, playing from the pocket, I don't think Dak's any better than Andy Dalton. Those receivers are going to find that out, and Dak's leverage is going to sink even further. Sounds like I'm taking an incredible shot at Dak, but I actually think Andy Dalton's a pretty decent quarterback. Same thing I think about Dak Prescott at this point. They're about on the same path. I think Dak's been surrounded by more talent, but I just don't see him having a great deal of leverage because he hasn't shown the kind of talent that, the great quarterbacks in the NFL have shown. And most NFL teams don't have an experienced starter, a guy that's played in playoff games like Andy Dalton. The Cowboys can move on from Dak Prescott, and to me, they seem to be setting the table that they might move on from Dak Prescott.
Yeah, I'm with you there, Jason. Just talking about leverage, it shouldn't be measured solely by compensation, if you think about it. Because Dak's going to get propped up by numbers just because of the value of others. Or if you want to look at a situation like a Jimmy G, look at Dak using Jimmy G's calculator of 2 years ago. He was the highest paid at $27 million. So Dak already gets inflated because he had more than 7 starts. And Jimmy G only had 7 starts and became the highest paid player in the NFL just 2 years ago. So that pumps Dak up. And then you look at the market right now and you look at situations, you say, well, Dak can play the franchise tag game. And that props him up if Dak stays who he is. But here's the problem that undermines this best leverage ever. Jason pointed it out. Andy Dalton's there on a $3 million contract. You trying to tell me that Dak Prescott is 10 times better than Andy Dalton? And that would just be at $30 million. So there's nowhere where you can look at that logic and start to say, you know what, Dak is worth all this money. That's why he doesn't have the leverage. He has the value because of Jimmy G, because of Carson Wentz, but he doesn't have the leverage. That's why the deal hasn't gotten done yet. They have not finished this deal because that leverage is not as great as they're advertising.
All right, so here's where I would point of order you, Jason. A.J. Green, Marvin Jones, Mohamed Sanu, Tyler Eifert. I think that's a pretty decent amount of talent. At one point, when Andy Dalton first got to Cincinnati, I'd say they were as talented as any football team in the National Football League, but they were the Cincinnati Bengals.
Ohio.
So, yeah, that's an issue. So, and then as far as talent is concerned, if the reports are right, and I have to assume the reports are, the reports are the reports, from the $35 million a year, if you're already offering that, then that would just prove my point that he has got a ton of leverage. If the Cowboys are already saying, hey, okay, $35 million a year, and he's saying, I'll accept that, except I want 45 in my last year, it seems to me that he's already got a ton of leverage, and they don't buy Andy Dalton as anything more than, QB number 2 as a solid backup in case something happens, in case somebody gets hurt. So, I think they've got a ton of – hey, listen, he has the leverage right now. When it's Patrick Mahomes' turn, then there's no question he's going to be the highest paid guy. The guy's a unicorn. I get that. But right now, we're just talking pure leverage. Right now, as we sit in May, I think he's got as much as anybody has ever had.
I think that Jerry Jones is chuckling, thinking about Dak having the ultimate leverage, because that's crazy. I want to ask a couple of things, and I only want you to answer one of them. But listen, Andy Dalton took the Bengals to 5 straight playoff appearances. Would Dak Prescott have done that in the same situation? I don't think so. Don't want you to answer that. I'm going to give you the other reason why I don't think Dak has, and this is why I want you and Marcellus to respond to this. Why I don't think Dak has the ultimate leverage. It's the wrong offseason for a quarterback of Dak's ability and Dak's resume to say he has ultimate leverage because, one, they have Andy Dalton. But there's a former MVP sitting out there posting pictures every day on social media that he is healthy and looking for a team to play for, Cam Newton. And so Jerry Jones, the maverick that he is, Marcellus, I'll start with you, and then Mark, you answer. Cam Newton and Andy Dalton competing for that Dallas Cowboys job versus paying Dak Prescott $35 million a year. Cam Newton, Andy Dalton, that combination this year, or paying Dak all that money, which would you rather have, Marcellus?
Man, this wasn't on the script. Don't do that to me. You know what I would have. Give me those two guys over the one Dak Prescott. Man, damn, you made me look bad up here. Here's the thing, though, Jason, that another thing poking a hole in the leverage of Dak Prescott is the fact that in 2021, let's be real, the response to the coronavirus pandemic is going to affect the salary cap next year. Who wants to be a free agent in 2021 when you realize you may have less salary cap space to work with as a team, and the revenues were decreased because of the empty stadiums potentially of this year? So if I'm Jerry Jones, I'm like, okay, Dak, we may franchise you, but don't think that this is going to play franchise, or we're going to give you this huge deal, because we can let you test the market next year, and good luck to any quarterback who's trying to make top dollar that doesn't stay with their team and try to go as a free agent somewhere else and get that money. So I would take the combo package of obviously the former MVP and Andy Dalton, but also be careful of the next offseason because it's going to be dire out there.
All right. Well, here's where you're both wrong. I take Dak, and here's where you're both wrong, and I'm going to end the leverage conversation right here. Is Dak Prescott as good as Russell Wilson? And the answer is no. Are the Cowboys already offering Russell Wilson's contract, yearly average contract? The answer is yes. He's got leverage and lots of it.
Reports are they've offered him that much money. That's reports. We don't know that factually. And I'll say this, if they're crazy for offering that kind of money, if so, and I'm just sorry. I'd rather have Cam and Andy Dalton than Dak Prescott overpaid.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. And be sure to check out more of the best clips from Speak For Yourself, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.